Thank you, Ms. Turner. We're here because, and when I say we, I represent the Montclair NAACP, and we came together as a collaborative. It's the Montclair CPAC, Special Education Parents. We are MFEE, you know MFEE, and also the Montclair PTAC. So we came together because we felt as a collective that people need real information. Not that you're not giving real information, but there's questions of people who aren't on social media like myself. There's people who don't attend the Board of Education meetings. Who are those people? Like the senior citizens, and I'm excited to hear that you're going to the Do Drop In next week. I got that call too. But we have folks who don't have kids in the school district. I go to different events and people are feeling like if they vote one way or the other, how will they be viewed in the community, because it seems like you gotta vote this way. So we came together not to tell people how to vote. We came together to give people information and try to seek out those questions that may not have been answered already, if that makes sense. Absolutely. So I'm going to start with just letting you know that some of our goals have to be with building trust in the community. The other goals are how we're going to move forward and how we got here. So I know you've talked about those things in Board of Education meetings, and I look at the Instagram messages that you send as well, but maybe this conversation will build a little bit more trust, because people will say, like you're talking to Diane, I don't profess to represent the entire Black community of Montclair. That's not my issue. But I was elected to be the president of the Montclair NAACP, so I would be disingenuous if I'm not talking about my concerns and where they lead in the Black community. Absolutely. Okay, so let me just start by saying that who is evaluating the equity impact of these budget cut decisions on the different student populations, like students of color, students who receive special education, ESL students, and et cetera?
Yeah, really good question. So I want to kind of talk about this process we're in now, which will look very different than building our 26-27 budget. So again, we've inherited this budget, right? It was adopted. It's a legally binding budget that we must adhere to. So with that being said, having to make these mid-year cuts in the anticipation that we don't get the resources that we need, the way we were talked through is that you have to balance the budget. So you have to go from a $7 million shortfall to a zero balanced budget, which is required by law, especially if I want to get assistance to make payroll in December, right? So the threat is that folks will not be able to get paid if I don't do these things that are required by law to do. So in order to do mid-year cuts, essentially you have to cut everything that the state considers what they call non-T&E, meaning things that are not binding in law that students must have. Those things you can't touch. Special education services, core instruction, right? I can't decide I'm going to get rid of math teachers or English teachers, things of that sort. So then you go to what can you cut, because I'm now required to take a $7 million shortfall, balance the budget to zero. And those starts with contracts. You look at personnel that is not necessarily, their positions not necessarily mandated. Doesn't mean that the kids don't need it, doesn't mean that it's not good for kids. But again, you have to address the shortfall in order for me to keep the organization running and make payroll in December. So that's essentially how those decisions were made. And the reason why I clarify that is that when we built our 26-27 budget together, what I mean is a community with community input, absolutely equity is on the top. I have a track record of over almost 20 years of being an equity-minded, equity-driven leader. I was very clear when I interviewed in the board, right, that is the perspective I come from, and needing support, because I recognize sometimes communities will espouse this idea of equity as long as they don't feel like it's taken away from them. So I say that to show the difference in that I inherited this budget, I myself don't have much say-so in terms of what is cut, because $7 million is significant, right? It's not like we had $1 million where we can kind of negotiate what gets cut and what doesn't get cut. So in that sense, when we talk about equity, many of us don't really have a say-so in this because of the shortfall, and this budget was inherited. Now, no excuse in our 26-27 budget, right? Because we build that together, and then we will decide, right, whatever financial resources we have, what is our priority as a community that must get funded and addressed first, right? And then secondary things, should we have resources? And then finally, things that if we don't have resources that we're gonna have to learn to do without.
Right. So I'm going to keep it real. When we talk about, yes, we have to have a zero budget, to the community, we look like we were in a correct budget, right? As taxpayers, we're paying the tax dollars that we're required to do. The Board of Education is meeting, the budget gets passed, and as town people, we're saying we're good. We're thankful for you coming in and saying, you know, look, there were some issues that were made, but the lack of trust comes from, like, how did we get here? And I know there's a lot of people who reach out to me who say, like, they want names. They want heads on the chopping block. And that really, I don't know that the trust will increase if we do not assure people in the community that those that made mistakes are going to be held accountable, because we're looking to move forward. How do we move forward with less, right? Because we're cutting staff because we have to. And I don't think that necessary cuts are questioned. I think this bulk of cuts, right? Everything came on us really quick, but it doesn't always seem balanced when people are looking at it in the community, especially when we look at our central office. So the questions that come to me is, a lot of the cuts that happen are our neighbors, right? The people who live in town might be because they live with their parents, or, you know, they're here and really struggling to be here, renters, right, who are fearful that if their landlord's taxes go up, then so do their rents. And as the NAACP, you know, we're fighting for affordable housing and things like that. How do you assure us that no matter how these votes go, that we will look at who got us here, how we got here, and that we're going to try our best to do better in the future? Because it's easy to say, you know, well, you know, I have to stick to this, and, you know, then equity will be a priority. Well, it's been a priority that the town understands since, like, we did show our achievement gap, right? When the reports came out, and the NAACP was very candid that we're in a crisis when we're talking about Black and brown children and their academic success. So we thought that these things are in place. We think that they are, you know, resolutions, laws, like you can't touch that. And here we go hearing about brother to brother being cut, sister to sister being cut, and Imani being cut. And we're saying to Imani, well, how much money do you get? And I think they said it's around $50,000. And we're like, you know, well, why isn't that being said from Ms. Turner? Like, you know what? Before we touch these programs that support the opportunity gap, that's the last thing I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to make sure that, you know, there's, you know, you buy your own cup in the coffee room or whatever, to make sure that we meet what we promised our African American students.
Absolutely. So again, and I'm always going to tell the truth. These programs were not in the budget, in the adopted budget, at all. Right? So first of all, we have a $7 million shortfall. They're also not budgeted. So by law, I can't, it's not my money to give, and I'm not saying that's what you're asking me to do, but there's no budget line. So it's not like I said, oh, I'm going to take $50,000 from Imani budget line for the deficit. They did not exist in the budget 2 consecutive years in a row. That's an issue. That's a fundamental issue in terms of accounting, right? And again, it's not their responsibility, so I'm not saying that it's the organization's responsibility. I'm talking about as a system, as a district. So to say that I cut these programs is actually not accurate. There was no budget line to fund them, right? And what I've done is, and working with some other community members, is to figure out a way, how do we fund these programs differently? So one of the things we're evaluating is our title funding. Is there opportunity with our title funding to provide? We've had other organizations that are willing, not the whole entire financial resource, but willing to, and I met with these folks, to say we can kick in such and such amount of dollar to keep this going. So for this year, because again, I inherited this, right? I didn't have a say, trying to like glue pieces together, right, to keep these programs that I do believe are very valuable. The other levels that doing things differently is that there's no program evaluation, right? So again, because these are taxpayers' dollars, moving forward, everything, not just these programs, we're going to have to really think about where is the data that supports that everywhere that I'm spending taxpayers' dollars are giving us a return on investment, that students are succeeding, that students are benefiting, right? Which is going to be a different way of doing business. Once again, the way these contracts were procured did not follow the standards. There has to be an RFP, right? Or else you get into this, it's not my money to decide who gets it, right? We present a need through that process, and organizations that can fill that need then respond to that. So there's going to be a lot of cleaning up that I will do, because one, it's the proper way to do it, that we as an organization, as a community, are going to have to, and it's my job to have a clear understanding of what that process is, and then help our students get those services that they need. So I want to be very clear, Ruth Turner did not cut and remove money from these organizations. Those funding and those budget lines did not exist.
I appreciate that, because I think that's the transparency that we need to have. We need to have these kind of real conversations. But let me go back, because I'm not sure that we answered the question about central office. Every email that I get, every person who stops me on the street says, why are we cutting like nurses? Why are we cutting security where we felt like our schools were safer? And we don't see these cuts because people, for a while, it was like, oh, you're a principal of this school? Then, I always looked at it, and I'm talking about Diane, looked at it as opportunities for promotion, right? If you move our principals and elevate them well-deservingly, then, everybody else can kind of move up. But there are questions about some of the movements that have made, and, jokingly people will say, like, we have directors of, like, magic markers. So, and I don't mean to minimize anybody's job, but we have a director of this and we have a director of that, and we have people that were there who witnessed and participated in the events that got us to where we are. When the list comes out of the cuts, people do not see any deductions at central office. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, there's actually a 3.6% reduction in central office. And furthermore, in the 24-25 budget year, the cuts that took place were only in central office to prevent cuts in the schools. I could not cut central office that would equal $7 million. All right, number one, personally, I'm not accustomed, I'm just gonna be very honest in my experience, with such limited resources. So I wanna understand that first, but we did make significant cuts there. Furthermore, what I want folks to understand is that there are really strong laws in New Jersey that protect educators. Mm-hmm. For example, I come from an organization where folks on the senior level are not tenured. So if they're not performing, right, if you need to make cuts, it's at the discretion of the superintendent. Here, folks have tenure. So I think people think that get rid of a person or these individuals, those individuals don't leave the system because they have tenure. Let's say they get removed from a particular position, right? Then they would be absorbed in a school with their same salary. That's not me. That's the way the law is written. Mm-hmm. So I need folks to understand that it's not a matter of, if I had discretion, a lot of things would be done differently. Let me just say that. And I know I can't get into personnel. No, I get it. So there's a lot of factors. So now if I do that, I'm taking a high earning person, demoting them, let's say, to a 10-year position, but they keep their same salary, mm-hmm. an easier job, right? And it's not productive for the system because those cuts don't technically happen because they have to get absorbed within that system, if that makes sense. Yeah. Then they will bump out somebody who's less seniored, who makes less money. So it would take more folks to equal the cuts. Does that make sense? Because yes. Everybody has tenure.
Yes. No, that makes sense. And I think that's the kind of, I appreciate this because this is the information that people don't understand. And, people around town like, oh, this person has tenure, and people even look at tenure differently, but we have to look at it both ways, right? Tenure protects people as well in their jobs. So I'm going to go to one of the other questions, and forgive my paper because I just want to make sure that I stay on track. folks are sharing ideas that will affect some people and not others. Two examples are suggestions to reduce courtesy busing and to try to provide more in-district services for students currently placed out of district for specialized services. How will you make decisions that address the fiscal crisis, knowing that every decision will have a positive impact on some and a negative impact on others?
Really, really great question. So I think the community will begin to see, because we're getting ready to kick off 26-27, believe it or not, budget season shortly, that they will see that we will have community forums, right? Because the budget should reflect our shared values, right? It's not just a document. We're saying that these are parties that are important to us, that we're going to take financial resources and fund them. So there'll be opportunities for community input in terms of, we're going to do survey, in-person town halls, tabletop discussions, go everywhere and anywhere to get as many voices as possible to say, as a community, and when you do that, themes bubble up, right? As a community, this is important to us, right? So then we recognize that after we built the required mandated stuff in our budget, then as a community, we're able to see what else is left and where are our priorities in those things, and make those decisions as collectively as possible. And then the community will be aware every step of the budget process, not just at the end when we have a finalized budget where there's a public presentation, but all through the process, right? How much state aid are we getting, right? What is going to be our revenue for the 26-27? It's going to be very transparent, right? How much of that is going to go to salaries? How much of that is going to go to healthcare? So folks can then begin to see, right, how much money we have to possibly fund other things that we also, our students need.
Right. So just so you know, and I appreciate that, some of the questions too are about how communication happens, and it seems that you're the one who holds all the information. And just as a suggestion, maybe some of our other leaders in central office or whatever, need to be marching to the same beat, need to be out in the community talking to different people and sharing the information, and I think that would build trust. That's why we
I agree with you 100%.
Doing what we're doing to try to
That's
get
why
there.
we did the frequently asked questions, not only for the public, but so that other folks, other leaders in the district can then also share that, because that is the most accurate information. I meet with my senior team, with my principals very often. The idea is cascade this information, right? It's not just for me to do so. I take the ultimate responsibility because this is what is considered the hot seat, right? They're not necessarily sharing great news, but providing the information for them, allowing them to ask me questions to get a deep understanding. We spent that yesterday doing that with a lot of our leaders. So I absolutely agree with you and have encouraged them to do so. I just want to make sure the information that goes out is accurate. And that's part where we're communicating and sharing, right? So that they can then, again, share it with their school community, share it with their parents, wherever, their place of worship, wherever they find themselves.
It was great to see, like, Halloween and teachers coming together and, really trying to keep the spirit up. What is your vision for keeping morale up? We went through COVID just like 5 years ago, and it was devastating for our young people. And now here's another loss, right, of time, loss of energy, meeting new teachers mid-year, whatever. What is your plan to keep the morale up and the high quality level of services that our staff provide?
Yeah, that's really challenging, especially in a time where the significant number of folks are scheduled to be laid off, right? Again, depending what happens in the special election, that will determine, right, how many of those positions remain cut and how many we're able to reinstate. So that's the challenge of that. So for example, we pivoted a lot of what we had planned for yesterday's professional development to be mindful of that, right? So to provide space for staff to come together, process what's going on, to allow folks who have been served notice of termination or layoff opportunities to interview with local districts, because they got to also think about their families and healthcare and everything else. So provided that space and opportunity for them to do it in that way. Again, we got together with the leaders. We did a processing circle. We planned to kind of say how can we best support our staff and what happens moving forward should we not get the resources that we need in December. Reimagining, what's going to happen, sort of plugging the hole. I'll be the first to say it is not ideal. We're going to have to get through January to June. If these cuts have to stay in place, it is not ideal whatsoever until we can build our 26-27 budget, because we just don't have any other way to do it outside of the potential additional resources December 9th might bring us.
This is a lot.
It's a lot for me, yeah.
Yeah, I know. And I will tell you that we definitely appreciate you doing everything you can to give us as much information as possible. And you can rest assured that the collective of the 4 groups that are here want to make sure that we give information. However, we're not trying to persuade anybody to do anything. And I think the burden lies on you and your staff to make people understand, no matter how the vote goes, how Montclair is going to respond to that. And I'm not sure that that's clear. I'm not sure that we update even the FAQs on the website. I even got a call, and I don't know if this should even be on our conversation, but as we go through these things, even the website, people go there for information, and it's kind of outdated with some things. We have to stay on top of that. We continue to pray for our families that their mom might be losing a job. Not even the jobs that are right here in our town, but, folks are losing SNAP benefits, and they're losing. And we just went through a local election, and we're going through a Board of Education election. It's a lot. And I'm not sure where people funnel their energy to concentrate on. We have another tax increase that's going to happen in 2028. So there's a lot of things that are happening in town, and I think we need to understand that. If like the folks who are saying, I'm just going to vote no. I don't have kids in the district. My taxes are too high. I'm trying to stay here. I know that we don't want no votes. I know that we don't want that. But for those people who are leaning towards no votes, I think we need to show more understanding and compassion to their issues instead of almost vilifying them. Like, if you vote no, then our school district's going to go to stuff like, I know they'd have to bleep me out right here, but those conversations I think need to happen. I also, talking with my collaborators, when you're out here, we have a disconnect with our town in these conversations. Tax increases, and we just would really like for there to be some collaboration. So if that could happen, to reach people in different wards. People have different issues all throughout Montclair. Sometimes the loudest voices get heard, and I just encourage you and the staff as we move forward to just think about presenting as a united front so that the information seems clear and concise. But I appreciate you today.
Yeah, and I will say, I've said it from the first day I got here. I told folks, invite me, tell me where to go, I will go, because I'm going to lean on the community, who knows it inside out better than me. So I'm open to talking to anyone, going anywhere. I'm trying to reach everybody and not just those individuals who are more easily accessible than others, right? Who may have the time to be on social media, the time to send 5, 6, 8, 10 emails, things of that sort. So I'm very intentional about that, but I also need someone to open the door, right, to go there. Like, I had to call and be like, how do I get time with the senior citizens, the Modern Aging Collective, because I just didn't know how it works here. So as I said, I want people to invite me. I believe in being open and honest. I have nothing to hide. I have no hidden agenda. Simply, my job as a superintendent is to ensure that our students, the over 6,000 students that I'm responsible for, get what they need. And I will do that in the best way that I know how to. So this idea of a special elections would not have been ideal, but when I said I looked at every possible resource, there just was not anything there. And I'm optimistic that given some time to clean this up, that it's not a matter of trust me, because of what I'm saying is that watch the actions. And after time, by being consistent, by being open, by doing what I fundamentally believe is the right thing to do, getting community input, folks will learn over time, right? That trust can be there. And I recognize that I'm not asking anybody to trust me today, but watch what I do and watch what I say. And I'm a person of my word, and I'm very committed to doing the job right, not because the public is watching, because Ruth Turner is watching, and my parents' name is on the line.
Thank you.
Thank you.